Hey everybody, we're back with part two of the state's appeal of Brendan Dassey's overturned conviction. Basically the argument section where the state is arguing what a coerced confession is. So that's where we're at. We're going to pick up basically essentially right where I left off in the last video. If you haven't seen the last video, perhaps you stop this one right now, go check that one out, and then come back to this one. What I'm going to try to do here, I think, I'm going to go ahead and finish my little rough overview of this section of it. Just kind of skimming over it and going through it and giving you some of my thoughts. But then I think what I'm going to do after I'm done with that is to try and go in and look up some of this case law that is cited in here, to look at some of these cases that I'm going to talk about here. And see if there's any little subtle nuances or anything that can be gleaned from looking a little deeper at cases, and to further my argument or otherwise. Anyways, so in part one, I talked about what happened. The state talked about two things that can render a confession involuntary. One of those things was psychological intimidation. Okay. Psychological intimidation is one thing, but I also want to call attention to something called psychological conditioning. Okay? When Brendan is repeatedly told over and over again, tell the truth, Brendan, be honest, Brendan, don't lie, Brendan, over and over and over and over and over again, that is what's called psychological conditioning. And Brendan would be one who would be very susceptible to it. So just to make that clear. So psychological conditioning, okay, where you basically say the same thing over and over and over and over again like that, that is combative. No matter how grandfatherly your tone is, saying it that many times over and over again is combative, and that takes it back up into the realm of psychological intimidation, in my opinion. I think in most people's opinion, because you think about how annoyed people in this world get when people repeat themselves. Just saying. So anyways, now I'm going to go ahead and go into the first document here. This is going to be the state listing cases in which basically the defendant or the juvenile, their juvenile confession was upheld by the court. And that's what they're going to go ahead and cite here is upheld confession. So we're going to go ahead and move into that document now. Okay, so now we're going to look into some of the examples the state offers in terms of confessions that the Seventh Circuit Court actually upheld. So we'll start with, in Carter v. Thompson, a 16-year-old defendant was intermittently interrogated over a 55-hour period while at a police station without a friendly adult, without a blanket, without a pillow, without a change of clothes or access to a shower, and without being told she could leave. In Gilbert v. Merchant, a 14-year-old suspect was arrested and interrogated for 9 hours without a friendly adult. In Rubalcaba v. Chandler, a 16-year-old suspect was arrested at 11:30 p.m., detained for 14 hours overnight in a police station interview room, and questioned for a total no less than 2 hours over the course of the sessions there. So, and in Hardaway v. Young, a 14-year-old suspect was roused from sleep at home, left alone in an interrogation room for 8 hours without a friendly adult present, and questioned 3 times for a total of about 90 minutes. Even when applying the de novo review, the court routinely rejects voluntariness challenges to juvenile confessions. For instance, in U.S. Riley v. Franzen, the police drove a 16-year-old defendant to the scene of a crime where the deceased body still lay, temporarily handcuffed him at the station, placed him in a jail cell, and denied his request to see his father. They also misled him to believe that his brother had already confessed. So, that's a lie. But anyway. And in Johnson v. Trigg, the court held admissible the confession of a 14-year-old suspect, even though the contemporaneous arrest of the juvenile's mother may have played a role in his decision to confess. Okay, so first case we have listed there is Carter versus Thompson. A 16-year-old girl, I think that's important, a teenage girl, was held for a 55-hour period without a friendly adult, without bedding, without a change of clothes, and no access to a shower. And she was not told that she could leave. Whenever she wanted, essentially. Now, I particularly think that this is really bad because, in my opinion, most teenage girls that I can think of not being able to change their clothes or shower in a 55-hour period is a traumatic event in and of itself, right? On top of the fact that she's suspected of some crime, which is probably also very traumatic to her. So this girl's head must have been chaos. It's literally chaos. I mean, yeah, for boys, maybe it's different. Boys, we can run off for 3-day weekends with dirt bikes or camping or whatever, or fishing. And, we can come home with an eighth of an inch of, layer of crud on us and whatever, and we're fine about it. But women aren't the same. It's a different situation. Anyways, moving on to the next case, we come to Gilbert versus Merchant. A 14-year-old was interrogated for 9 hours without a friendly adult. Now, I agree, for a 14-year-old, 9 hours would be a lot like an eternity, but there's not a whole lot to that. At least not what was given in the brief. There's not a whole lot to that makes it extraordinary. So, moving on to the next one, we got Ruvalcaba versus Chandler. A 16-year-old suspect was arrested and held for 14 hours overnight in a police interrogation room. Questioned a total less than 2 hours in that time. That's a pretty long time, 14 hours and overnight. So he's being, he's not being able to go home, obviously. So that would be, for a 16-year-old or for a teenager like that, being away from home from their parents in that situation where they're intimidated would be intimidating, I think. But anyway, moving on to the next case. This one is particularly interesting. I believe I will definitely be digging into this one and looking at some of the specifics on this. Riley versus Franzen. Drove a 16-year-old boy to the crime scene where the deceased body still lay there. Took him down to the police station, handcuffed him for a while, placed him in a jail cell, denied his request to see his father. When he asked to see his father, they denied it. And they misled him to believe that his brother had already confessed. Personally, I want to look into this one. I have questions. How exactly was he misled to believe his brother had confessed? The circumstances of that I'm highly intrigued about the circumstances of that. Was he told he could leave at any time? And could he, in fact, have left at any time? I wonder. Why was he... If, a lot of these other ones, they're mentioning that these juveniles could have just walked out at any time. Could this one? And if this young juvenile requested his father, why was it denied? Obviously, a request was made. So, I don't know. I'm wondering about the circumstances of whether or not he was actually under arrest and Mirandized, or whether they were just questioning him there. So, I definitely want to look into that one. That one seems like there might be something to it. But anyway, moving on to the next one, we go to Johnson versus Trigg, a 14-year-old who had confessed after his mother was arrested, and they believe that the arrest of his mother contributed to him confessing to the crime. Now, that seems pretty wild, but like I said, I would need to see the specifics of that case really to know whether or not the mom was justifiably implicated in the crime or not, or if there was some reason why they believe she was involved, and what the general circumstances, I guess, of it were. So without knowing that, it's hard for me to say, but that is pretty crazy, because I know for a 14-year-old, especially, I don't know if he, like I said, I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if he had a dad or whatever, but having your mom get arrested like that, and especially if she was a single mother, I could imagine that would all be very, earth-shattering, essentially. So, anyway, none of these cases, though, really, except maybe the first one. The first one was pretty crazy. Talk about any, like, interrogation techniques or, like, promises made or anything like that, which are out of line, essentially. They just kind of I don't know. The one about the one, I don't know. We need to know the circumstances, obviously, on a couple of them. So, but if the circumstances are right, these could have been perfectly fine. So, anyways, we'll move on to the next part where we see the cases that the court basically declared the coercions involuntary. So here that comes. Okay, so now we move on to the cases that the Seventh Circuit Court has seen that they deemed involuntary. This court has sustained challenges to the voluntariness of a confession only in extreme circumstances. In Woods v. Cluson, the police awoke a 16-year-old suspect early in the morning, forced him into handcuffs and jail clothes, but did not give him shoes. Interrogated him without his consent, with a fresh set of officers taking over the questioning after several hours into the ordeal, showed him graphic pictures of the murder scene, and presented false fingerprint evidence that they threatened would hang him in court. Reviewing the juvenile's constitutional claim de novo, the court held the confession was involuntary. In A.M. v. Butler, an 11-year-old suspect was illegally arrested and subjected to a 2-hour unmirandized custodial interrogation without any adult at his side. He had no way of leaving the police station and claimed that the police officer pounded on his knees and told him his fingerprints were on the murder weapon, and said that if he confessed, God and the police would forgive him and he could go home for his brother's birthday party. The officer denied these activities, but acknowledged that he was close enough to the child and that he had repeatedly told the child he was lying. This court, over vigorous dissent, found the confession involuntary and granted relief under AEDPA. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cases in which this court deemed the confession was involuntary. All right, starting out with Woods versus Cluson. 16-year-old is awakened, forced into handcuffs, into jail clothes, but no shoes. Interrogated him without any consent. Fresh officers taking over after several hours. Showed him graphic pictures of the crime scene. Now, that's something I've always had kind of an issue with. If you're interrogating somebody and you're potentially hoping they're going to say something about the crime scene that they shouldn't know, doesn't showing them pictures of that crime scene create a problem? Just saying. But anyway, so moving on from that. And presented false fingerprint evidence that they threatened would hang him in court. So, yeah. This court, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, ruled that involuntary, that confession involuntary. And rightfully so. It's a mess. Anyway, now, if we think about that one there. Now, what about Carter versus Thompson? That was the one with the teenage girl held for 55 hours. No change of clothes, no shower, no pillow or bedding of any kind. So, these kind of have a very similar thing, right? So, I don't know why they would rule hers voluntary and this guy's not. So, that's, I think, another reason why I'm going to end up looking into some of the cases on this, just to see maybe what the differences are, the subtle differences and nuances. But anyway, moving on to the next one, we got A.M. versus Butler. An 11-year-old, really? An 11-year-old? Okay. An 11-year-old, illegally arrested and put through 2 hours of unmirandized interrogation without a friendly adult. He had no way to leave, and an officer kept pounding on his knees and told him his fingerprints are on the murder weapon. and said that if he confessed, God and the police would forgive him and that he could go home for his brother's birthday party. That's a specific promise. So that clearly violates the outright fraud clause in terms of involuntary confessions in the court of law. So anyways, so the officer, of course, denied any of these activities, but admitted that he was close enough to touch the boy, and did tell the boy repeatedly that he was lying. So, anyway, so in that case, a boy being repeatedly told that he was lying, amongst other things, obviously, I don't know if it's confirmed or not that this cop was pounding on his knees and stuff. Cop obviously denies it. So, I'm not sure where the truth lies there, but, it just shows, though, that what sticks out to me is the repeated telling him that he was lying. Yeah. So we move on. At 16 years old, like Brendan was, when officers are bullying you, you're not as capable of standing up for your rights. You've been brought up in a system where you're always told that the cops are the good guys. It's especially with Brendan's kind of mentality. He was easily bullied by them and overwhelmed by them. Remember overwhelming of free will from the first video? I definitely think he was overwhelmed. So right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go play some clips of Brendan being interrogated and some of the repeated things that were repeated to him over and over and over and over. So here they come.
You remember that girl taking that picture? You're getting off the bus, it's a beautiful day, it's daylight, and everybody sees you. You do too. Do you remember seeing that girl standing there taking a picture?
Brandon, come on.
You do know, don't you?
Brandon.
It's either yes or no. I mean, I'm not putting nothing in your mind. You tell me if you remember that girl standing there taking a picture. You tell me if you remember that girl standing there taking a picture. Was she? Huh? Why won't you tell me that?
I was just trying to think of if I'd seen her.
Well, did you see her standing there taking a picture?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me that? You scared? Huh?
Yeah.
What happened to that girl?
She left.
She didn't leave. What happened to that girl?
Well, she stayed there 5 minutes and then she left.
No, that's what you're being told to say.
Brandon.
What happened to that girl?
I don't know nothing. That's all I know.
Brandon. What happened to the girl, Brandon?
Do you think he did it?
I don't
What
know.
happened to the girl?
We
I
don't.
don't know. That's all I know.
So you got off the bus, you walked down the driveway. She's still there, right? You see her, don't you?
Yeah.
Who else is out with you?
Concerned. Did something happen that shouldn't have happened? Well, why are you lying to me about that?
I ain't.
What do you mean you ain't?
I don't know where she is.
Don't worry about that.
That truck did not leave that place. It did not go out the driveway and take a left.
And nobody's saying that Steven did this, okay? Nobody's saying that. That's it. Brandon, I know you're still not telling me the truth. Because I know you look all choked up to me. Is that girl alive, Brandon?
I hope she is.
Is she?
I don't know.
Yeah, you do know Brandon. Were you involved in this? Where'd they go?
She left and he went in the house.
She didn't leave. Brandon, she didn't leave.
Okay, so do you hear the part there at the beginning when he tells Brendan she didn't leave, and then shortly after that he tells Brendan, I'm not putting anything in your head, and then literally seconds later after Brendan says she left, he says she didn't leave, and then continues to say she didn't leave, and on and on and on and on like a broken record. So anyway. It's laughable how literally just how obvious it all is. Really, I don't know. Anyways, because for him to say not putting anything in his head, I mean, are you kidding? Right? That whole video, he's sitting there putting things in Brendan's head constantly. I mean, it's just, anyways. What occurs to me is that it doesn't seem like he's misleading Brendan, like, is technically allowed, apparently. But it seems like he's just continuing to lie, just to tell the lie and say, she never left. She never left, Brendan. Why are you lying, Brendan? On and on and on, repetitive, over and over and over. So, anyways, that's where I'm going to go ahead and end it, this segment. I'm going to probably do one more segment about, one more segment that's beyond this one. And anyways, but I will be working on the next video here, and it will probably be out maybe hopefully Sunday. Anyways, I think I want to look into some of these cases cited, definitely, though. I definitely do. I think some of them have a very interesting look just by the description. So it'd be interesting to know some of the more details, I guess, of them, some of them. So anyway, until then, anyways, peace, and please subscribe.